If you ignore what you're doing in the follow-up and you're just chasing those initial calls, you're potentially sinking a ship that could have been something amazing.
That's Steven. He owns Closable.ai, where he helps founders and lean sales teams stop losing deals after the call ends. Stay with this one. By the end, you know exactly why deals stall after a good call, and it's probably not what you'd expect. Steven, you spend your time inside sales pipelines, helping founders and lean teams fix what happens after the first call. From what you've seen, where do things start going wrong?
Things start going wrong before the deal even hits the pipeline, as there's usually systems missing to help teams enrich data and get good info on the conversations they're going to have. But we assume that's set up well. I tend to see things going wrong in everyone's follow-up stage. They have a call, it gets moved to a follow-up stage. It makes projections really difficult. Even using the tools that are out there, there's just nothing concrete to really move deals along in most sales organizations.
So you would say that a lot of rejections could be avoided if the follow-up is done properly.
Correct.
So why do founders almost always assume that stalled deals means the offer or the pricing is the problem?
I think that it's easy to, I don't know if it's always that, but I think what's important to note is that a lot of founders they're always in a problem solving mode, right? And that's what a lot of founders are good at. They're thinking on their feet. They came up with this idea, right? There's a magic to their brain. So I like to take a step back. And when we talk about how a founder's analyzing something, they're going to immediately start to think of, what can I fix? How does this need to be fixed? So in your question, a lot of that tends to be like, oh, it's the pricing, it's the way the offer's presented, or all of that. They're not, unless they have a sales background, they're not always thinking in the way that maybe it's the process in which we're approaching prospects, or the type of conversation that we're having with prospects, or the way that we're trying to convert the deals and things of that nature. And sometimes, a lot of times actually, when things are launched, the offer is good, but almost maybe it's the wrong offer at the wrong time, and they have to implement a smaller offer to launch people up on, or something like that. And as a founder and someone, I do think in that way a lot. What can I fix? And it's a tough place to be if you don't have the sales background to think in that direction.
So you would say that it would be good to bring someone on who does have a sales background and to analyze the process rather than trying to fix a problem that may not be there.
Absolutely, yeah. Everyone should have someone with a sales background in their corner.
Definitely.
As long as it's not purely e-commerce, absolutely go for it.
Definitely.
Get a sales rep.
So after a call that founders feel good about, what's actually happening emotionally for the prospect?
Prospects, you say emotionally, and I think everyone's a little bit different there, but I think the big thing to think about is the type of world we live in, right? A prospect has a call. They get off a call. They didn't buy on that call, right? We're assuming they didn't buy on that call, and they get off the call, and life picks right back up. They have to go pick up their kid, or they run into another meeting, or they just got this email that a client's angry or whatever. And the last thing now they're thinking about is the conversation that you just had with them. So you just need to slow down and understand that sales takes a lot of touch points, takes a lot of respect and boundaries. But it's more critical now that we're not doing the typical follow-up, are you ready to move forward yet? And more of the, let me provide something to you of value to remind you of this, help them in their decision-making process, and see a pathway to signing on. That's how you bring on deals, especially in the AI world, because we now have so much at our disposal in terms of how we can analyze things faster and come up with ideas and things like that. So it's very important that you're getting very personable now in the sales process.
Definitely. So you're a fan of giving that value first and perhaps freebies.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't get into the logistics of what happens before a sales call, but if I'm having a sales call with someone and my goal is to move them along, absolutely, I'm going to provide them some things of value in some way, shape, or form, or create some very low risk way to bring them on board.
So about giving that value first, before the.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just very important that if your job's to have a sale come in, give a prospect what they need to make a decision and make it as low risk as possible to bring them on.
So, on paper, when nothing feels wrong, why do prospects sometimes still hesitate or pull back?
It's human nature just not to say it. A lot of people will come on a call and they'll tell you as a salesperson, just so you know, I'm not going to make a decision on this call. I've had people come on the call and tell me that and make a decision on that call. So it never really means anything, but general human nature is that people are indecisive. Now, there are some people that are also really bad at saying no and they hate providing rejection to somebody.
Yeah.
That's why I'm married, because my wife is that way. I joke, but she's actually one of those people. She gets me on these calls with salespeople all the time. She's, Steven, I couldn't say no to having this next conversation. So you have to be the one that tell them to say no.
Oh,
And I'm just like, babe, there really are two different sides of the coin, but most of the time, my wife is not a founder by any means. She's a pediatric physical therapist. I think a lot of founders are either like, hey, I am coming on a call and I want to know if this is for me. I already did my research and I'm ready to make a decision if I like you. And then there's the other people who are in this very discovery mode. And if they're in the discovery mode, they probably have other conversations lined up. They're not sure if it's for them. So there's a lot of things to think about. And if it's a larger ticket price, you have to understand who needs to get involved in that decision. If it's B2B, there's a C-suite, there's a board. And then if it's B, you worry about things like spouses. You're respectful of the boundaries like that spouses bring to the table. A lot to think about in terms of why a prospect might not decide right then and there. And that's not always the worst thing. A lot of coaches taught over the past few years how you need to push harder and get that person at the end. And in certain instances, sure, but a lot of times it helps to be very respectful to the person you're talking to and get to know them well. And if you can do, that's what's going to bring the sale home. It might take an extra couple weeks, but I'll wait a couple weeks as long as it's worthwhile, right? So, and most founders should.
definitely.
Revenue
So,
is profit. Yeah.
definitely. So, having that patience to discover the client's decision-making style and or the organizations. So, can you walk me through a real example where fixing a follow-up, not adding more leads, has changed the outcome?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll use an example and I'll keep it generic. B2B services, training, ticket price anywhere from $50 to $200,000, coming in and helping organizations become AI enabled throughout their departments.
Yeah.
So that's the offer in a nutshell. That's a very heavy B2B sale that requires cross-department buy-in. It requires C-suite buy-in. If there's a board, it requires that as well. So you could go out and you could try to sell that directly. What found is that, and I'm going to tackle this from a couple angles. I know your question's specifically on the follow-up, but to go back and be like, hey, what's the problem in the sales process? Go try and sell that directly. That's a very difficult sale. The easier sell is getting somebody on a 10K call to do a level 1 type of training, right? Before you bring in their entire employee base and do some structure that's 50K or whatever it is, get the executives on board with how you train, how you do things. And that's one of those natural extensions that a lot of founders need to think about and what makes sense. I always consider this working backwards, right? You figure out what the main thing is that you want to sell, but then from there, you want to work backwards. Founders, one of the big differences from founders that make it and founders that don't make it, I find that they work in opposite directions. Founders that don't make it, they might start at the place where it's like, well, we can get a lot of customers by doing that in there. But if we're like, okay, this is what is going to be our core thing and it's how we can make a lot of money down the line, first that and simplify. And until you get to those steps that you need in order to ascend a client and prospect into where they're really valuable to you. On the follow-up stage aspect, like you really wanted to know about, you got to think, what does it take to get somebody on board to spend that level of money for their organization? For some organizations, like, I don't care what they are, like, even if it's a 9-figure organization, even if it's a billion-dollar company, they don't just say okay to 50 or 100K if they don't have a relationship with you. Sometimes if they have a relationship with you, you get there where it's, no problem. But If you don't have a great relationship with them yet, or they just did a $10,000 engagement with you, it's a different process. You're still building trust. One of the things that you might want to do is if you just train the executives and now the goal is to train their entire organization, maybe let's use AI a little bit to help game plan what their organization does, what their departments are. This stuff is probably already talked about on calls. So it's probably already on transcripts. So you analyze the whole thing and help you out with and plan how your offer, which is probably already documented somewhere, aligns with them and the game plan for how to implement that, right? So you can have AI kind of game plan that, maybe throw it into something like Gamma really quick. Gamma Docs, it's a way to just, it creates documents or web pages really quickly. And there's one page.ai, right? There's a lot. But you can take all the content and get it designed and ship it off to them. And now it feels like this custom game plan for them. And it took 15 minutes outside of the calls you already had and all the documentation that you already have. So all that homework has been done. And now it's just, hey, let's get AI to help analyze this, create the game plan. Let me look over it. It's Gamma, ship it off to the prospect. And now they have something when they have their internal meeting to look at. That's okay. I like how they said they're going to do this, or they're going to look at the security or the AI use policy, right? So one example there for you in terms of how to change the game from just, hey, are you guys ready to move forward yet, into creating more of a personalized process. That's something that's important. And especially with AI now, information is so easy to come by. So you really do need to stand out, and everything should be personalized because you just don't have the excuse anymore to not.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I've seen anything that is not personalized recently, but I've seen things that aren't personalized well, which is another issue.
Yeah, you see some things that do a good job with, and some things that do a poor job, and that's almost the new norm. And there's lots of softwares that are like, hey, we'll cold email a bunch of companies. And when they're personalized and they find some random stuff about your company, but a lot of it's not the stuff that you really care about. And it just doesn't do a good job bringing you on. A lot of us know it's, oh, that's AI, right?
Yeah.
Where I love AI and being in sales is that I think that AI allows us salespeople to become a lot more involved in the process. It allows us to do less of the admin stuff, less of the stuff that takes us time, and allows us to have more communications with people and make sure that things are truly aligned and we can really help somebody where it makes sense. So that's how I always try to run things. But with AI, I can just spend less time of the thinking and the planning. Salespeople can really be more involved in the process now than ever before.
Just getting that extra human touch, just leveraging AI for all the admin work. So why does scheduling a next meeting often create more pressure instead of clarity?
Because you're scheduling a meeting, most sales reps, it's kind of like you have your average Joe sales rep and then you have your experienced sales rep. So average Joe sales rep here's bam fam, book a meeting from a meeting. This is what I have to do. This is what my sales manager tells me what to do. It's how I'm going to close more deals and hit my quota. So they do it. They book a follow-up meeting and it gets them some better results. But there's this level of pressure, right? The more experienced sales rep, they're going to book a meeting from a meeting. But in their head, in the meeting, they're determining what the realistic next step needs to be and what that prospect needs. And when they book the meeting, they're creating the expectation of what that is. And that's not necessarily a decision call, where it might be involving somebody else in the process to talk about a very specific part of the process. And that takes the pressure out of the sale and get in where it needs to live. Now, you always need some pressure in sales, but it keeps the conversation when it's not ready for that in terms of, we need to focus on making sure this is a fit, right? We have to make sure that you can see this and I can give you something of value. And it should always be like, hey, what can I give you of value? What can I help you guys with as we have these talks? And then what is the actual thing that we have to discuss on this meeting? Because if you book a meeting without a future probable agenda, that's where that pressure comes in.
So always make sure you have a future probable agenda and just figure that out during the first meeting.
Yes. And that's hard if you're new selling on an offer, but a little bit of experience helps.
Definitely. So what do prospects tend to feel even if they can't explain it to themselves?
In what moment exactly?
In terms of, okay, I'm in a meeting and you tell me, okay, let's book the next meeting. What do you think I'm thinking?
I think inherently you're thinking, great, more time. This person's just trying to sell me. If you're not asking for that follow-up meeting, it's this person might be trying to sell me. I don't want to take more time. I don't like doing these meetings. I don't like hopping on Zoom or whatever, just a phone call, right? Can it just be an email? 2020 whole thing. So inherently people protect and gate their time, which isn't a bad thing. So it's important that if you are having a meeting, again, that agenda and what you're going to be talking about is very well thought out. So that way there's an expectation of a real reason for it. And then
Yeah.
a lot of those emotions start to dissipate.
If I knew what the real reason is for the next meeting, I would be more open to it because I think now more than ever, people gate their time and ensure that they're doing things that are on their agenda. So, how should founders think about follow up differently if the goal is to reduce pressure and make decisions feel safer?
Don't try to force somebody into a decision. Make the decision a no-brainer. So if you are just trying to force somebody to give you that yes or no, they're still struggling with they don't know if it's the right fit. You have to get it to the point where it's a fit or it's not a fit, right? And anytime you're in that in between where there's still work to be done, right? The work isn't finished for the salesperson. So they need to get more information. I was literally on a sales call on Friday and I was meeting more people in a company. It's a large company and one of four big players in their market. And I was expecting something different. You never know what kind of situation you're going to walk into. And it was a second meeting, but I was meeting more people. The people that I met, they still weren't really clear on what the initiative was within the company. So for me, I didn't do a single ounce of really selling there outside of just being super transparent about what my process looks like if we do happen to work together. But I didn't ask them for anything. Heck, I didn't even book a follow-up meeting because at this point, they're in a place where they need to get clear internally, where I can't help them. And there's no way for them to know whether I'm a good fit for them or somebody else is a good fit for them if that's not understood. Sometimes the company's still not ready. They're having early preliminary talks, which happen sometimes. But on the sales side, you need to help a prospect get to the point where they're clear about what they want.
So the prospect would need to be in a place where their process is very clear and how your solution could fit into their process.
Otherwise, what are you selling them and how confident are you that you're going to do a good amount of work there? Because then at that point, we're just there to collect a paycheck and we're not there to actually make a difference. And that's not what good sales is about.
Good sales is about being there and solving the problem.
Exactly. And I don't want to work with anyone. And most people don't. There's some people that will, but most people don't want to work with anyone they can't help. It's a frustrating process and it doesn't usually lead to continued work or referrals or meaningful relationships. And that's why a lot of us are in sales because we like meeting people and talking to people and just I think that's what's enjoyable. As a salesperson, it's just talking to people and getting to know them and helping each other out along the way. That's life. That's just one way that we enjoy doing it as salespeople. We like talking to people. That's why we're in it.
Definitely. So if you're in sales, you have to really enjoy talking to people. But the AI will do all of your administrative work already.
There you go. Yeah, to an extent. 80% of it, maybe right now.
So
in a
when
really well-defined company with really great stuff. Maybe like 50% if it's not well-defined.
So when AI is used well in follow-up, what does it actually improve about the experience for the prospect?
Speed. And everything is speed, right? For a prospect, they might not inherently think this. Everyone wants to be communicated well, right? So that much they know, but no one likes waiting. And I was just consulting with a team so this is a great example just to tie in. I was consulting with a team.
Yeah.
The time to proposal sometimes was like 2 weeks after the call. They had good calls and it was like taking 2 weeks and they weren't closing any deals. And it's like, why do you think you're not closing deals? They forgot about the call, right? So if you use AI and you get that out within 24 hours, I mean, you can do it within 3 to 5 hours if you're not booked back to back, then it's fresh in mind. The prospect sees it. It's easier for them to remember and make a decision on it and make sure it's the process they want to do. So the biggest thing is speed, and it's good for sales. It's good for the prospect. It's good all around, right? Because a lot of prospects if you look at this from the other side of it, you might say, oh, you're closing more sales. So of course you're going to say that. But a lot of prospects will relate to this. You've probably gone through processes where you went to purchase something or go through a discovery of purchasing something and you never did it. 6 months later, a year later, you start going through that process all over again. And that can happen multiple times. So speed is the best thing there because we live in a now economy and everything's moving at the speed of light, especially now that there's AI. It already was with phones and social media and the way that our brains are changing and horrible at retaining information. So now we can be a little bit quicker.
So,
With the quality and retain the quality or even make the quality better.
so looking ahead, what do founders who ignore the part of sales in terms of following up usually regret later?
The issue is when you ignore that, it's a pretty quick regret because you're putting money into generating leads and appointments and having your sales team perform. It's really important to understand the opportunity because what everyone listening to this podcast probably does understand is revenue and profit. So if you just take numbers, 100K revenue, 250K revenue, one, they're starkly different because one's 150% higher than the other, which is insane to think about if there's that much more opportunities that you're losing in the sales process due to a lack of follow-up. But also all of that 150% increase is coming from the money that was already spent in terms of acquiring the leads, which means that it's 150% potential extra profit, not just revenue. It's profit, right? Because it's all affecting the bottom line. There's not more work going into it, unless you're maybe purchased a little software or something. But all in all, that's the big difference. So if you're running really lean and you don't have any margin to grow or scale or put money back into the business, that's where it is. If you want to grow faster, you need cash and you can go get funded. But as anyone will tell you, if you have the more profit, the merrier, right? Money solves a lot of problems in business because even if there are glaring problems, you can use money to go hire the right person to fix the problem. Money is very important. Cash flow is very important. Profit's very important. If you ignore what you're doing in the follow-up and you're just chasing those initial calls, you're potentially sinking a ship that could have been something amazing. And you'll never know what that opportunity could have been until you're on to the next thing and maybe making the same mistake all over again.
Definitely. So always follow up. If you learn anything from this episode, follow up. Yeah, make sure you think about the process. Thank you, Stephen, for coming on the pod and for sharing all your insights.
Yeah, Panida, was great. Thanks for having me on.
You can read more founder stories like this at techforfounder.com.